So over the past few weeks, I've been tracking a lot of the different developers on the Diablo 4 team, and we have a lot of updates to go over and some things that are both disappointing, but also basically set the stage for how PvP will be balanced in the future. So one of the biggest concerns in the beta was the actual itemization of legendary aspects. There were two things that a lot of people were concerned about. One was the simplicity of the legendary aspects. The other was the sort of balancing in terms of class specific aspects and overall general aspects. For those of you that don't know, some classes have some really strong legendary aspects that we found. For example, I think the most common one is actually the barb that gives you additional damage based on how much fury you have. This is why you've seen 400k crits from the barbarian coming out with upheaval, which is just absolutely amazing. But no other class was really able to do that. And so we have a comment from Joseph here talking about how people don't realize how many more legendary powers exist beyond what was displayed in the beta. Now, this is something that I've actually considered myself. Obviously, I have played earlier iterations of this game, and I could have sworn I remembered certain other aspects myself. But this is a confirmation from the developers themselves saying, basically, we haven't even seen nearly enough of the game to make a decision like that, or even to make any judgments. So this is a really cool thing to have happen. And just to give you a little bit more clarification, someone responded slightly confused. Do you mean that the beta didn't show us the other legendary powers on the list, or we just didn't get access to them? The Codex of Power contains less than half of all the possible legendary powers that can be found in Diablo 4. Plenty more legendary powers can be later found in the game experience. Now, this makes sense because we did get locked only to Act 1 with additional acts available. A lot of the aspects were actually found in dungeons. So what does this mean? Well, this could potentially mean that there's only general aspects left, meaning there's no more class aspects, which could mean that the balance is still a little bit thrown off due to some of the legendary aspects. Of course, no game is going to be perfectly balanced, and in fact, I would guarantee you that a lot of Diablo 4 is going to be broken in the beginning months of the game. Some classes are going to rise to the top, and some classes are going to be shoved down to the bottom. This is just the nature of a lot of games when they release. But getting more options that are available to everyone, again, we're going to get them through the Act dungeons, I imagine. This is going to be big news for people who are more interested in experimenting a little bit with their builds, but hopefully we'll see additional class aspects, although I'm not 100% sure if that will be the case. I really do hope that we're going to get additional class aspects for people like potentially the Druid or even the Sorcerer, because I found that, well, Sorcerer has a few that are more interesting, but they're more just damage sticks, or potentially regeneration is the ones I found to be most useful. And I'd really love to see some more variety in some of the aspects, making it a little bit more interesting. Something like the Rogue, for example, with the twisting blades that allows you to have it circle you after using it, is something that I found to be very fun and interesting. Whereas, you know, something like the Barbarian giving you just extra damage. Of course, these are the good ones, but I hope to see some more unique aspects for the classes in the future. This next response from Rod is really interesting because this is coming from someone who I myself have played around 25,000 hours of League of Legends. So I really enjoy the competitive esports scene. And with PvP coming in Diablo 4, although we have not had much information about it, someone was wondering, Leonardo here, if Blizzard will see Diablo 4 fitting in the esports scene or not at all. And Rod responds, no. Which honestly is a little disappointing. Obviously, I didn't really expect it to be in the esports scene. However, this implies some sort of balancing idea around PvP, and that is that they're probably just going to let things be to some degree and focus on the PvE content. This is very applicable to a lot of games that really are releasing with a PvP game mode, but their focus isn't necessarily PvP. And PvP just kind of floats by the wayside. If they were planning on potentially getting some sort of competitive mode running, not to say that they won't have a competitive mode, but potentially just, you know, some sort of, I guess, ultra competitive mode with esports, then you would see a lot of variable reducing ideas, because a lot of the times it is forced to have happened to have a balanced playing field, which would have been a little bit more interesting in terms of participating in PvP. However, with this response, I think that PvP is going to be a lot less interesting, in my opinion, and have a lot more RNG related to it, as well as a lot of imbalance, because a lot of things can be broken in PvE and then absolutely garbage in PvP. You can do something like, for example, Guild Wars 2 does this a lot, where you specifically balance PvP, where you actually adjust the skills associated with PvP only, and then in PvE they remain the same. And I hope that potentially in the future Blizzard decides to do something like this. Now, this last conversation here is really interesting, because this comes from Luke Garon. It was really recent, and that is that someone asked, if D4 is about choice, would you consider moving up the talents, the specific talents, to the sorcerer basic tier? So for those of you that don't know, in the basic category for every class, there are no passive skills. The reason for this is, well, as Garon said, we didn't want to put any passives in the basic skill tiers because we didn't want to overcomplicate the system, right? As he says, easy to learn, difficult to master. And then as a response, that means that the question is, are you guys okay with a build being forced to spend 2 points in a basic skill they will never use? And it is true, there are some builds that basically never use a basic ability. There are some builds that you can use certain resource generations from other skills, or just generally focus on less cost skills. For example, even though the Necromancer has a really good basic, there are builds out there with the Blood Mist, Corpse Explosion generating essence, and then using Bone Spear. I was basically never forced to use my basic. And although, again, the Bone Splinters basic is very powerful, you do need to be up close and personal to actually get benefit out of it. So if you didn't want to do that, you could easily run Corpse Explosion, Blood Mist, Bone Spear, absolutely nuke people, and have permanent essence regeneration and have near permanent invulnerability. So some builds really don't need basics, and we're talking level 25. The massive amount of legendaries that we're going to get, as well as the additional levels, are going to massively change this and potentially add additional builds. And as a response, Luke Garon says, exactly, the question is, do we want to guide new players or force endgame players? And considering how new the game is for everyone, we varied on that side in making the skill tree not too overwhelming at very low levels. That said, things can always change as the game matures. This is very important. I think a lot of people are, so focused on what the game is right now, that, potentially in the future there will be some changes. And I don't see them sticking with the exact same philosophies on a lot of these things in a year or 2 years from now. However, that is a lot of time, and some people won't wait for that. So that is totally understandable as well. But I think in general, they have a correct philosophy in making the game a little bit more casual for the average player, in allowing the skill tree to be pretty simplified. And a lot of people have talked about how the skill tree is boring. And so for those of you that really dislike the skill tree, if that is a deal breaker for you, expect it not to change, because they seem to be really focusing in on the average casual player rather than the hardcore endgame players. So that's all I have for you today. And I want to comment on something before I leave you, and that is, a lot of people are really mad about people making videos, or people even talking about Diablo 4, or even making judgments or setting expectations. I think everyone should be able to do whatever they want. So just, kind of either ignore them or just do whatever you want. Like, if you want to engage, if you don't want to engage, that's totally fine. For myself, I'm super excited. I think Diablo 4, again, as I've said in multiple videos, it was like an 8 out of 10 in the beta. I played the earlier iterations and it has just gotten better. It is super fun. I'm so excited. And so I'm going to continue to cover the game, as well as talk about the game, as well as potentially make guides for the game from what I've learned over the previous gameplay hours that I've spent. So super excited for it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Are these good things? Are these bad things? Are you excited? I'll see you all tomorrow.